Last year I had about 10 minutes. This year I've got about 20 minutes. And if I come back next year, I'll play the rest of that damn tape for you. Of course, it's always good to thank those who paid for lunch. So how about a big round of applause for AECOM? I'm here today because of a special invitation from the association, but also by a special invitation and a check from George Doyson. George, would you stand up? Muscle Wall. Thanks, George. It's great to be here talking about floodplain management and talking about leadership and preparedness and tying that in with the lessons of Katrina. Remind me of a speech I gave in Texas a couple of years ago to a dog food convention. And in order to protect my line of work, I'm going to change the name of that company to ABC. So when we started this conference, and I was standing off in the green room ready to come up, and the CEO had gone up before me, much like your CEO enthusiastically came up and thanked everybody for what they were doing. And then he asked the crowd 3 questions. I'd like for you to respond with ABC. Are you with me? Okay, this is a dog food company, and we're selling dog food. And he said, who has the best dog food? ABC. Who has the best price? ABC. Who has the safest dog food? ABC. And just about that time, everybody had a little tasting cup in front of them with 3 pieces of dog food in it. Pop, they put it in their mouth. I said, damn, this guy got these people fired up. This is something else. So the next thing he did, like most CEOs, he put up the revenue, the P&L chart, profit and loss. And ladies and gentlemen, this thing was flat line. It wasn't selling. It was like, woo. I said, whoa, this company is broke. I'm glad I got my damn check before I came here. And the CEO started asking, well, what's the problem? We got the safest dog food. We got the best marketing plan. We've got the best price. What's the problem? And he asked that question 3 times. Nobody answered. Finally, some dude in the back put his hand up and said, who is that? I said, this is Bubba from Lake Charles, Louisiana. He said, Bubba, what's the problem? Bubba said, boss, the problem is the damn dogs won't eat it. I'm, again, honored to be here with you to talk to you about floodplain management and lessons from Katrina. And I thank y'all for the great work y'all do to create a body of knowledge to go back and try to convince people to do the right thing. And like that dog food company, people won't eat it. That's a part of the problem. So this year, I'm going to make a recommendation. But the recommendation is follow this. For those of you who use social media, the first 5 of you that tweet something from the next 15 minutes, you come see me, I'll give you a book. Is that a deal? Napoleon said people are motivated by 2 things, self-interest and greed. So show up and get your book. But if you tweet something from the speech, my recommendation is this. The last letter of your acronym need to change. You're not going to create the change we need for the 21st century calling yourself management. You need to be leaders. You need to identify yourself as opposed to managers as leaders. Because you don't have an option, we got to change. Management is a good last century word. If we're going to create the change we need to manage water, because of all the resources in the world, you're engaged in managing the most precious resource in the world, and that's water. Because all the things that we think are important today, none of it is important as this. The problem is, of the 10 billion people in the world today, 2 billion of them can't do what I just did. And from the time you get up in the morning until the time you go to bed tonight, 1,000 children will die from bad water. So this product that you lead, I'm going to go ahead and create the change right now. That product that you lead, because we got to change. As we go from 7 to 10 billion people in the world, Water is going to be perceived as a global product. Now, there's a water CEO out there that says water is not a human right, and I think he's a damn lie. You agree with me? He said water is not a human right. And I won't tell you the brand of water it is. It doesn't matter. But he had the arrogance to say that water is not a human right. Do you believe water is a human right? Of course you do. The water you manage may be a challenge, or the water that you lead may be a challenge for you, but downrange, somewhere south of you, there are people waiting on it to drink it. The people in New Orleans drink Mississippi River water. So the you people who flush up in Madison, we drink it in New Orleans. And along the way, some of you put some stuff in it. We got to stop putting stuff in water. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to require leadership. Because many of you look at water as a threat. You try to challenge it. You try to manage it from the perspective of protecting those new subdivisions that's been put in on the outside of town, where somebody took a big old pump out there, emptied a swamp, and put a subdivision there. And it's amazing when people say, well, I didn't know it was going to flood there. Well, what the hell you think is going to happen if you dump a swamp? You take the water out of it, at some point in time, what happened? That water's going to come back. This is why I think, with all due respect to your organization, in the 21st century, you're going to have to change that M to an L. Because you're going to have to create the leadership to teach the people in America we're going to have to be more respectful of our water. It's not just controlling it from a flood perspective, it's how we're going to manage that water. Because one day water could be threatening your home. But I can tell you this, you can't live without water. And we've got less clean water today than we had yesterday. And we're going to have less clean water tomorrow than we got today. Those of you in this room who've studied water and worked with it all your lives, you're going to have to create that change. You're going to have to create that change. We're going to have to lead this thing as we go from 7 to 10 billion people. With 2 billion in the world today, don't have access to clean water. You're going to have to lead that change. And it's going to take leadership. It's going to cause people to change. Now we're going to do a little change exercise. Are you ready? I'm going to give you an order, a military type order. Are you ready? Okay, cross your arms now. Okay, very good. How does that feel? Feel pretty good, right? You're hugging your favorite person, you. Now, how about do it the other way? Put the other arm on top. Okay. Feel a little different, huh? It should feel a little different. It's not what you're used to doing. Relax. Give yourself a hand. You did pretty good with that. Think about the people back in your office. You know what they're saying? Well, I'm wondering what the hell they're going to come back with this year. Oh, we're going to have to download a new FEMA map. Oh, Lord, have mercy. And we're going to have to start talking not about management, but about leadership. Oh, Lord. They're sitting back in the office wondering what you're going to come back with. So you might as well go back with something good and radical, because we're going to have to lead ourselves out of change. Next slide. Here's a small reason why. Back one, there you go. When that storm Katrina hit about almost 10 years ago, we call it K10 now, as a hashtag in the trade down in New Orleans, Katrina 10, it came in big as the country of England. And the biggest damage from this storm was not the eye of the storm. The biggest damage from the storm was the water, as all of you know, because it basically destroyed everything around the Gulf coast of Mississippi, around Biloxi, and in that area. And it put a 27-foot wall of water into Biloxi area. In New Orleans, it pushed water through the gap there on the east side of the Lake Pontchartrain, and ended up putting 17-foot of water into New Orleans. And the levees broke. And people right now, there are all kinds of documentaries coming out, Katrina plus 10, talking about it was a levee problem. Well, here's my take on that. Anything built by man can be destroyed by Mother Nature. So get over it. I can tell you this, if you live next to the Mississippi River, you ought to assume something. What? It's going to flood. That comes with a risk. And we need to get people to come to grips with that. When I'm out in the Midwest, people ask me, say, well, General, and some of you have heard this story before, well, General, how do you know if your place is going to flood? Well, to me, it's a very simple solution. If you can see water from your damn house, it's probably going to flood. This is not that sophisticated. Like the poor people in Texas last week, many of them saw them on television. My heart went out to them. Some of them had $1 million homes. And they liked that because you could go out there in the morning, they could hear the Russel River just going by and see the fish jumping in the water. If you're that close to that water, you got to assume that someday it's going to flood because you moved in a flood zone. And you can go around South Louisiana and South Florida, and you can see them areas, and you look at a map 100 years ago, and you can assume it's just a function of time before those places flood. Remember, 28-foot wall of water from the sea hit Biloxi. What happened if a 28-foot wall of water was going to Florida? Is that your problem as floodplain managers? If it's not, it will be, because there's going to be a lot of people trying to understand how a surge works from a storm, because that actually is what caused New Orleans to flood. New Orleans' eye of the storm had turned right and went to Biloxi. But the surge water pushed in there by Katrina, pushed that water through Lake Borgne and got it into the city, and the levees fell. And you say, well, how high should you build a levee? Where are the engineers? How high you ought to build a levee? Well, down in New Orleans, we had Thibodeau and Boudreaux, one on each side. And they looked down there and said, hey, does that look good enough? Look good enough to me, buddy. Any levee can fail. A levee will give you early protection. It will give you early warning. And you might trust it to protect your property. But if the river is at flood stage and the authorities tell you it's time to evacuate, you need to evacuate. Because any levee can fail. Get over it. And as is the case in the city of New Orleans, we had some compounding mistakes. Where are the engineers again? There they are. Okay. Who decided to put the generators to the hospital in the basement? The architect. Where are the architects? Who really done it? And the architect said, no, it's the CFO. It came down to money, damn it. There ought to be something fundamental about that, ladies and gentlemen. If you're walking through a town, somebody said, well, we're going to put a hospital right here. And you're looking up at ships. This is not that sophisticated. With all due respect to AECOM, you don't need them to figure this crap out. I mean, this is pretty simple. You're walking along, you look up at a ship and say, the hospital shall be here. Now put the generators in the basement. No, ladies and gentlemen, we got to change. That's why the last letter in your alphabets need to be leadership. Because you know this. We're going to have to change our culture. And again, the biggest threat to flood management or flood leadership every day is inside of counties and parishes in America, and they're called building and planning zone boards. They cause more problems than anybody else. You cannot fix all the problems they've made in the last 100 years. But moving into this 21st century, we're going to have to go back and do some adjustments, right? That's why I require you to practice leadership. Now, the next 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about leadership, because that is what creates change. You cannot be the introvert in the back of the room anymore, because you deal with the most precious asset in the world, water, besides people themselves. People cannot live without water. And it's either an enemy of the day, and it's always a friend, because you cannot live without it. Next slide. Lessons of leadership are these 3 things that I learned from General Washington. 238 years ago, he led our ancestors to fight the most powerful army in the world, the British Army, and won our freedom. And During this battle, the Capitol in New York had been burned and destroyed, and the one in Philadelphia was threatened. This is the middle of the winter. His men are not well trained. They don't have proper equipment. They don't have proper training. They don't have boots. Some of them don't have ammunition and magazines for their weapons, to load their weapons up. And at Christmas, on Christmas Eve, with an army made up of militia and regulars, militia being our current day National Guard. It's Christmas. Over half of his men are missing from the bitter cold or they're AWOL. Sickness and AWOL. And on Christmas, he takes on the most powerful army in the world and he does a river crossing. There's a water story here. Isn't that cool? And it's got ice in it. The river is almost frozen over. But for every river, he finds a solution. He's got boats. And where do you think he get the boats from? Well, he practiced old army supply system called TOPS. Anybody know what TOPS is? Take other people's stuff. And if I was talking to the troops, that S would be something else. You know what I mean? So he borrow boats. He go out and leave a little note, say, we're borrowing your boat. We're going to save the nation tonight. And that night, they killed or captured nearly 1,000 British soldiers, keeping the revolution alive. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what people do when they have a mission. And you've got to leave here with a mission to not only control water, but to protect our water. General Washington understood he had to teach his troops to do the routine things well. Guess what? Down in those planning and zoning boards, you're going to have to create a standard that they've got to follow. Because right now they're following a standard called the almighty dollar. And they're putting future generations, kids unborn yet, at risk by putting people inside a flood zone. Are you with me on that? You've got to be the leaders, and you've got to create a standard for these planning and zoning boards across the country. We can't keep up with them. You cannot build enough structures or walls or levees to protect the mess that they're making. You need to create a standard for them. And that needs to be tied into loans and grants from the government. That need to be created. We don't have a choice. Do the routine things well. General Washington taught his troops that we've got to create a routine for future development. Number two, we can't be afraid to take on the impossible. And there'll be people said, well, how are we going to fix the mess we've created for the last 100 years? Well, there's an old Army axiom. You can't protect everything. But you got to protect that which is most important. Right now, we got a plan that FEMA will go in and help people raise their homes. We may not be able to protect every home, but every hospital need to be what? Above the zone. We need to go in and we need to fix these hospitals. Because the biggest problem we had in New Orleans is how we keep people alive. Our two hospitals didn't get any damage from the wind. It's when the water came in and their feet got wet, the VA and the charity hospital, and it destroyed the hospitals. Right now, we're rebuilding two hospitals there at a cost of $1.3 billion because their feet got wet. I can go to Tampa right now. How many of you from Tampa? Anybody from Tampa? You go to the public hospital in Tampa, and at high tide, you go out there and touch the water. Now, what are you going to think is going to happen when the hurricane comes to Tampa? That hospital is over with. It's a rebuilding project now. We've got to fix that. You can't protect everything, so we've got to protect those things that are most important, based on the mistakes we've made in the last 100 years in building. We should not have old folks' homes inside the flood zone. And the older I get, the more concerned I'm about that. Yeah, we got one in Plaquemine Parish, been evacuated for the last 3 storms. All of it done right outside the eye of a hurricane. We got to change that. We got to change how we're going to do business. And point 3, we can't be afraid to act even if we're being criticized. Because when you go back with this to your state and you tell people we need to change the standards, what are they going to do? They're going to talk about you like a dog. You over-regulate. You want to regulate business. You overreaching. You're trying to take our authority to make decisions at the local level. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to be prepared to take that heat. Because if you're not, get out the way. Because somebody else needs to stand up. We got to create some change in this nation when it comes to how we deal with water. Do you agree with me? You got to have a voice. Because what I want to know is when y'all going to meet in Washington and have a march on Washington over water. We don't have a choice. Our water is under assault every day. And it's not intentional. It's in fact from going from 7 to 10 billion people that the world wants stuff. And we create and make stuff, right? And the more stuff we create, the more stress we put on our water. It's going to take you, the people in this room that understand water the best, and try to protect it. It's not an option going into the 21st century. So the 3 points on leadership again, do the routine things well. Don't be afraid to take on the impossible. And we got to do big things about the impossible. How do we teach this computer how to taste and smell? How do we teach this computer if you're going down a road and the road is flooded for it to tell you to stop and turn around? How do you put a program in a car that it turns the car off if you're going toward a flood? Think about if we were using 21st century technology, what it would have done for that baby who lost her life last week driving down a road and ended up in a river. We got to embrace technology. And right now we're not, because of individual decisions and about the challenge people have with over-control by the government. We're going to have to do something about this water. And y'all are part of the solution. You with me on that? Now, my last point is this. This impossible piece about teaching the computer how to taste and smell, we don't have an option. We got to get that done. Think about that app in front of you. If we did the impossible and we taught a computer how to taste and smell, you'd be able to pass it over a glass of water and tell if it's safe to drink or not. You'd be able to take it home, or your kids take it home and pass it in the refrigerator and say, is this safe to eat? And we could have it on an airplane landing in Atlanta, and it tells the pilot, the person in F-15 has a flu, don't land in Atlanta, fly that plane to Shreveport. The plane lands in Shreveport, and the flight attendants come out and put a little stick in your mouth. And by this way, this is not invented yet either. We got to focus on doing the impossible. And you in floodplain leadership need to have a list of impossible. Where is your list of impossible? Things that everybody say we can't do today, that is what you need to leave here. Focus on. If you're not focused on that, then you're just plowing over last year's crops. What are we say today is impossible? Put that map of the United States up, Jason. It's going to be a flip a couple forward. This is why. One more. Right here at the end of that Mississippi River, there's an 800 square mile dead zone out there. That is not a case of nature. That's a case of induced creating stuff all over the country, and it ended up in the Gulf of Mexico. We've got to figure out how we're going to clean that dead zone. It's 800 square miles. What will it be in another decade if we don't do something? We've got to take on the impossible. Water is a lot bigger than just flooding out somebody's weekend camp or flooding out somebody who end up intentionally in the dead zone. It's about keeping people alive, number one. That's the number one priority. But number two is how do we keep that water in clean water? And we're going to have to take that on. It's just not about controlling water. It's how we clean the water that we've already dirtied. Globally, that is a problem. And if it's a problem globally, it's also a problem right here in America. Look, I enjoyed coming with you. I've given you half of the speech now. The rest of it you're going to have to pay for. But I'm looking forward to coming back. I enjoyed this time with you today as I did last year. But as I leave, I would like for you to give me 1 more minute and a half, and I want to give a tribute to our troops, those who are serving around the world today, doing their duty, standing on the North Line, doing what people say are impossible. Are you with me on that? Play the walk-off, Jason.